I used to thank God for my husband every night before bed. Now, every time I close my eyes, I hear the echoes of what I didn't know. The laughter of strangers in the dark, the sound of betrayal wrapped in love. For 2 years, I lived with a man who drugged me every night. And I never knew. I thought I was lucky. Married to a loving American who treated me like royalty. He called me his queen, and every night he brought me a cup of tea before bed, his special tea. He said it helped me sleep. At first, I believed him. Until I began waking up with strange bruises and aches I couldn't explain. I'd ask him what happened, and he'd laugh softly, brushing my hair back. You have mild memory loss, baby. You move a lot in your sleep. I believed him, because love blinds. But one night, as I stared into that cup, I felt something deep inside whisper, this isn't love. It's a cage. And from that night, I began to watch. We met on a dating app, a random swipe that changed my life. His name was Michael. His smile gentle. His words healing. He said he'd always wanted to visit Africa. That he loved our culture, our warmth, our simplicity. At first, I ignored him. I had heard the stories of men online who vanished after promises. But he was persistent. He called me sunshine. He said my laughter lit up his mornings. And slowly, I let him in. We talked every day. He wanted to know everything. My family, my dreams, my fears. I thought it was love. It felt safe, real, pure. 3 months later, he was at my doorstep. Handsome, polite, and everything he'd promised to be. My parents adored him. He spoiled us with gifts, laughter, and expensive surprises. My mother said, this man was sent by God. When he proposed under the mango tree in my father's compound, I said yes without hesitation. If only I knew that the same hands that placed the ring on my finger would one day hand me a cup of deceit. When I arrived in America, I felt like I'd stepped into a dream. Michael decorated our apartment with petals and candles. He kissed me every morning, made me breakfast in bed, and whispered, you'll never have to lift a finger again. At first, it felt romantic, being adored, cared for, protected. But slowly, I realized protection could also mean control. He refused when I said I wanted to work. You don't need stress, he'd say. I can take care of you. Just love me, that's enough. He took me for long drives but never introduced me to anyone. No family, no friends. He said he didn't like people intruding into our peace. I told myself it was fine. I convinced my heart that solitude was love's secret. But love doesn't isolate, cages do. The day he took me for a routine checkup, and convinced me to get an implant so we could enjoy each other longer. I didn't see the trap. I saw a husband who planned our future. Little did I know, he was planning my silence. It started gradually, the nights I couldn't remember. He'd bring me tea, kiss my forehead, and say, drink my love. It helps you rest. At first, it worked. I'd fall asleep almost instantly. But over time, the mornings became strange. My body ached. Sometimes my legs felt heavy. Other times, I had find faint bruises. When I asked, he'd smile, stroke my cheek, and say, you move a lot in your sleep. Maybe you're dreaming too wildly. I laughed it off, until one morning I woke up wearing something different from what I remembered putting on. That day, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman staring back. My eyes looked empty, like someone else lived inside me at night. He noticed my silence and kissed me softly. You trust me, right? And like a fool in love, I whispered, yes. That yes would haunt me for years. Months passed, and I stopped questioning the blackouts. It was easier to live in denial than to fight confusion. But my cage was beginning to show its bars. He took my phone, saying, you don't need social media. Too many toxic people. He stopped me from going out alone. Said the city was dangerous. When I tried to call my family, he always had to be present. At first, I told myself it was love. But love doesn't lock doors. One evening, I begged him to let me visit a nearby store alone. He stared at me so coldly that I froze. Then, as if realizing his mistake, he smiled and hugged me. You don't understand, baby. I'm protecting you. The world doesn't deserve you. And I believed him, again. But that night, I woke up to faint whispers in the living room. Unfamiliar voices. When I tried to stand, my body refused to move. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. That was when I knew. Something inside that tea was stealing my nights. It began with a scent. A faint smell on my bedsheets. Something foreign, musky, not Michael's. I washed them immediately, but the question stayed in my mind like a haunting echo. Who else had been there? One night, I decided not to drink the tea. I pretended to sip while he watched, smiling proudly like a doting husband. When he turned away, I poured it into the sink. Hours passed, and for the first time in months, I didn't black out. But I heard things, muffled voices, footsteps, the squeak of a door I never saw opened. Fear crawled through me, but I stayed still, pretending to sleep. At dawn, he woke me up with breakfast and his usual soft voice. "You slept so peacefully last night," he said. My heart pounded. If I slept peacefully, then who was walking around in our house at 2 a.m.? There was one door in the house that was always locked, his office. He said he handled private clients there, but I never once saw him work. One afternoon, when he went out, I tried the handle again. It was still locked. But as I turned to leave, I heard a vibration, like a phone on silent mode, coming from inside. I pressed my ear to the door. There were faint voices. Men. Laughing. Then a phrase I'll never forget. I stumbled back, my knees weak. My breath came in gasps. That evening, I asked him if he had guests over earlier. His eyes darkened for a moment. Then he smiled. "You're imagining things again, love." He kissed my forehead and handed me my tea. This time, I drank it, because I needed him to believe I was still blind. The mirror became my enemy. Each morning, I saw new marks on my skin, faint, almost invisible, but real. My lips sometimes hurt, my body sore. I began to record my nights on my phone, placing it quietly on the bedside table. But every morning, the phone would be gone. When I asked him about it, he'd laugh and say, "You sleepwalk, sweetheart. You probably misplaced it." Sleepwalk? Then how did it end up in the living room every time? Battery dead, memory cleared. One day, I found a camera bag in his wardrobe. He claimed it was for our beach trips. But when I checked, the memory card was gone. The day I realized I couldn't trust the man I married was the day I began to trust only my fear. It was a Friday night. He was celebrating some business deal. One I never understood. The house smelled of whiskey and false joy. He danced around laughing, calling me his African goddess. Then he passed out on the couch. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to move. I went to his study and searched for my phone. I found it locked in a safe. The same safe he said contained important documents. But next to my phone was a pouch filled with cash, gold bars, a pistol, and a white powdered substance that smelled exactly like the tea I drank every night. My hands trembled as I held it. This was it, the poison of my nights. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't run. I wouldn't scream. I would find the truth and make him pay with it. I needed proof. Not fear. Not suspicion. Evidence. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I laughed, cooked his favorite meal, kissed him goodnight. When he went to make the tea, I set up the small camera we used during our trips, hidden between the books on the shelf, facing the bed. I drank the tea like always. Within minutes, darkness swallowed me. When I woke up, he was humming in the shower, cheerful as ever. My body hurt, but I ignored the pain. I reached for the camera and hid it in my drawer. That day, I didn't eat. My hands shook as I waited for him to leave. When he finally drove off, I locked the door, closed the curtains and pressed play. The first few seconds were normal, him carrying me to bed. Then the door opened. 2 men walked in. My world ended in silence. I pressed play and my life rewound into a single, unbearable hour. The camera angle was small and grainy, but everything was there. The way he carried me, the careless smile he wore like a mask, the sound of the lock clicking, the door opening, the steps that stopped at the foot of the bed. 2 men entered like men entering a transaction, not a home. They moved with business-like timing. They never looked at me with tenderness, only with the cold practicality of people doing something they had been paid to do. After each violation, they handed him cash. He counted each bill, pockets full, then shook the other man's hand as if closing a deal. There was one moment the camera captured that I will never forget. him patting my hair afterward, a fatherly, mock tenderness, while the men left with an air of completion, their footsteps swallowing the house's breath. My chest broke in the quiet room. I had proof. Not a dream, not a bruise, but currency exchanged, receipts of my nights. I could have screamed. Instead I sat very still and thought of law, of witness, of exposure. I made a choice then. I would not become the scene of a shouting match. I would become an instrument of closure. I copied the file to a tiny flash drive and pocketed it. I tucked the camera back where he never looked. When he came home that evening he kissed me and said, "Everything okay?" I smiled and said, "Perfect." My hands were trembling with a plan. Panic teaches cunning. I could not trust a single device in that house. Not his computer, not the cloud accounts he controlled, not the phone he kept on the bedside with a code. So I created redundancies. 2 flash drives, one hidden inside a hollowed travel book, the other mailed anonymously to my sister back home with an explanation to hide it and never mention it. I recorded audio notes to myself, disguised as drafts of a journal, and wrote dates, names, and details in a locked notebook I kept in the lining of my purse. But proof alone would not be enough. I needed allies who understood how predators hide behind paperwork and charm. I found a domestic abuse support hotline and with my voice shaking, I described what I had without naming him. They connected me to an immigration support nonprofit that specialized in helping migrant women who'd been exploited. They listened. They believed me. They advised, "Do not confront. We can help you collect evidence and work with law enforcement." I met a counselor in a dim room with a kettle and a pot of chamomile they insisted I drink. For the first time in a year, someone told me I had been violated, and that it was not my fault. They also gave me a legal contact, a public interest lawyer who had handled cases where abusers trafficked women under the guise of intimacy and marriage. That night, when I crept into his office to photograph documents, I found a ledger, names, dates, amounts, coded initials, and 2 addresses. One of them was local, the other was a P.O. box. As I snapped photos, my throat tightened. The ledger was the thread. If I pulled it, the whole fabric might unravel, but someone else might notice first. My phone buzzed with a single incoming notification. From an unknown number, the message read, "Check the T." My blood went cold. I stared at the ledger with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, professional, the kind used by people who expected to be reviewed. Each entry had a shorthand, initials, amounts, and what looked like short codes. New York/2 a.m./C. I cross-checked the dates with the footage and realized the timing matched. The entries corresponded to the nights I'd blacked out. I took photos, saved them to every secure place I had, and began to trace the finances. He kept the cash in a safe, but banks leave paper trails for larger transfers. If these were strictly cash deals, then there were suppliers and people laundering the proceeds. I couldn't do forensic accounting, so I used what I could: public records, receipts I'd seen in the trash, a business card with a shell company name that sounded like a landscaping firm. When he was out for a run, I slipped into his study and opened a drawer where he kept receipts. Behind a stack of receipts, I found a simple white envelope addressed to a courier company. Inside was a receipt for a drop. The address matched an apartment complex 2 neighborhoods away. I memorized the number and dialed it from my hidden burner. Only static answered. Back at home. My heart pounded as I was about to leave the room when his phone buzzed on the table. I had seen him protect that phone sacredly. Tonight, by fate or carelessness, it lay face up. A message preview flashed on the lock screen. Client delayed. Bring 2. Check the T batch. My hands went cold. Someone else managed the batches. This was a ring, not an aberration. And now, someone else had the power to change everything, or blow my cover. I needed law and muscle without spectacle. Going to the police alone with a story like mine would have been a nightmare. A foreign wife, an American husband, allegations with grainy footage. I needed a professional to present a case that would be undeniable. The nonprofit connected me with a lawyer named Rosa. A woman with tired eyes and an iron method. She met me in a coffee shop and did not ask to see the footage immediately. Instead, she listened, asked precise questions, and told me what evidence the authorities would need. the ledger, recordings, a chain of custody for the footage, and corroborating proof of control and isolation. We made a plan. Rosa would reach out quietly to a detective she trusted in the human trafficking unit, using anonymous channels so my name did not appear in public records yet. The nonprofit would help with temporary safe housing if things went sideways. They emphasized patience. A legal takedown required more than outrage. It required airtight proof and timing. That same week, I learned another layer. The powdered substance in his safe was not just a sedative. It was cut and sold wholesale, a product he both used and distributed. A local supplier's ledger matched some of his initials. If true, he was not only exploiting me, he was part of a business that preyed on other women. We were ready to open a file, but timing became everything. The ledger showed an upcoming consistency check scheduled for that weekend. His suppliers would be present. If the police moved in too early, they would miss them. If they moved too late, evidence could be destroyed. The team proposed a coordinated operation. The twist was cruel and simple. He sensed a shadow of suspicion and, for the first time in years, left the house earlier than usual. He returned home with the smell of cologne and something else. A grin that felt like a countdown. The day of the sting had been set, and I realized the night might come sooner than we planned. We rehearsed the plan in hushed voices and folded maps. Rosa had arranged a meeting between the nonprofit, a tech volunteer who could mirror the camera feed, and the detective who could deploy officers quietly to the nearby addresses. The strategy was surgical. We would gather enough evidence to arrest him for trafficking, assault, and distribution. The police needed to observe payments, supplier interactions, and the presence of the sedative in his custody. The feed would stream to a secure device held by the detective. Backup drives would be kept off-site. On the night chosen, I did what actresses do. I prepared my role. I wore the same nightgown he loved. I set the book camera in its usual place, but this time Rosa's tech had seeded the feed. It duplicated the footage to a hidden server and flagged any door activity. I swallowed the tea he handed me, but only because I had swapped the cup in a move that felt like madness. I replaced his measured portion with an identical cup from the kitchen where I had dissolved a harmless bitter to give the illusion of the drug's effect. I would not be left unconscious. The plan relied on me being awake enough to press the discreet panic device beneath the bed. The house hummed with normalcy. He kissed me, checked his messages, and left his smoke on the porch. The first man arrived on time. Footsteps. The door. Then another set of steps. I kept my breathing slow. Through the camera, I could hear the men, their voices crude, professional. The tech whispered into my ear through a tiny earpiece. Hold. Officers are in position. The sound of a car door outside made my stomach drop. Then the bedroom door opened again and my husband walked in with a face I'd never seen. Calm, satisfied, and very sure of himself. Then someone knocked on the front door. Not the officers. A neighbor? The knock stilled the room into a new kind of suspense, a knock that would unspool the next move for everyone. The knock came again, louder this time. Everyone froze. The two strangers looked at each other unsure. My husband hissed under his breath, his calm cracking. He motioned for them to stay quiet, then stormed out of the bedroom toward the living room. I heard muffled voices, angry low, then a sudden crash. I pressed my ear to the wall. The knock hadn't been a neighbor. It was the police. Everything after that happened in seconds. Footsteps, shouts, confusion. I pressed the panic button beneath the bed, signaling the team that the scene was active. From my hiding spot, I heard him yelling, "You have no right. This is my house," followed by the unmistakable sound of handcuffs snapping shut. The men tried to run but were tackled at the door. The last thing I heard before the world went silent was the detective's voice. "Ma'am, you're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, like something that belonged to someone else. But I wasn't just safe, I was awake. They kept me at the station overnight. Rosa was there when I woke up. Calm, firm, motherly. She said, "They got everything. The footage, the drugs, the ledger, even the money trail. You did it." But all I felt was emptiness. My body was free, but my mind was still trapped in those 2 years. Every memory of laughter, of shared breakfasts, of whispered promises, all poisoned by that tea. The officers showed me photos of other women. Immigrants like me, all found through fake online relationships. Some never made it out. He hadn't just hurt me. He had built a business of betrayal. Rosa said the media would find out soon, but I wanted silence. I didn't want headlines. I wanted justice that would echo beyond the news. So I agreed to testify, not as a victim, but as the voice for the others who couldn't. The courtroom smelled like cold marble and truth. He stood there in handcuffs, looking smaller than I remembered. No suit, no smile, just a man stripped of pretense. His lawyer tried to make it look like a misunderstanding, that I had agreed to everything, that the footage was taken out of context. But the evidence spoke louder. The drugs, the ledger, the footage, the fingerprints, the deposits, every lie collapsed under the weight of facts. When they played the recording, he wouldn't look at me. But I looked at him, steady, unflinching. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I simply exhaled the life I'd been holding in for 2 years. And when the judge sentenced him to 45 years, the room erupted in whispers. But in my heart, there was only silence, the kind that sounds like peace. Healing wasn't magic, it was a slow, silent war. I returned home to Africa, to the warmth of my mother's arms and the scent of home-cooked stew. But even there, I'd wake up sweating, reaching for a cup that wasn't there. I joined therapy sessions through the same nonprofit that had saved me. I spoke to women who had survived worse, women who found their voices in the ruins. Each story reminded me that justice isn't revenge. Justice is redemption, the moment pain finds purpose. Months later, Rosa called. The authorities had uncovered a network. 8 more men, multiple victims, and financial records linking Michael's operation across 3 states. The sting I started had grown into a federal case. He thought he silenced me. But my silence became a storm. A year later, I stood in front of a small building with a sign that read, "The Cup of Courage Foundation." It was my gift to the world, a safe house and legal hub for immigrant women caught in abusive relationships abroad. We offered shelter, education, and connections to organizations that could protect them. On the opening day, I brewed tea, my tea, not his. When I served it to the women gathered there, I told them, "No one will ever use your silence against you again." The cameras flashed. I smiled, not for fame, but for freedom. And somewhere across an ocean of memories, I could still hear his voice saying, "You'll never lift a finger again." He was right, not for him, but for justice. When the journalist asked me, "Why name it the Cup of Courage?" I smiled softly, because courage was the only thing I could drink when everything else was poison. She stared at me, eyes glassy, pen trembling. I could tell she wanted to ask about him, about what I'd gone through, about the videos. But she didn't. She respected the silence between survivors. Instead, she asked, "What do you want women to learn from your story?" I answered, "That love without respect is captivity. That kindness without boundaries is a weapon in the wrong hands." The interview went viral within days. Donations poured in. And soon the Cup of Courage Foundation became more than a shelter. It became a movement. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a victim, but as a voice. 2 months later, I got a letter from the prison. It was from him. At first, I didn't want to open it. But curiosity has a strange way of testing forgiveness. Inside was a single sentence written in shaky handwriting. "I finally tasted the tea you used to drink. They serve it here every night. No apology. No remorse. Just mockery." But instead of anger, I laughed. Because the cup that once symbolized my suffering was now the metaphor of his own decay. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve answers. Only silence that echoes louder than words. When I returned to the city where it all happened, I walked past our old apartment building. The windows were boarded up. The walls cracked, forgotten. Just like the lies that once lived inside. I stood there for a while, remembering the girl who used to smile while sipping poison. The one who believed love could never hurt. Then I whispered, "Rest, girl. I took it from here." And I left. Lighter, freer, certain that closure isn't found in revenge, but in the power to walk away without turning back. Months later, I was invited to speak at an international women's summit. Hundreds of faces looked up at me, Some broken, some brave, all listening. I told them my story. Not the version filled with shame or pain, but the one that ended with fire and freedom. I said, every woman has a cup in her hand, filled with what life gives her. Some cups hold joy, others hold betrayal. But the power isn't in the cup. It's in the choice to drink or to pour it out. The hall erupted in applause. And as I stepped down from the stage, I felt it, the weight of the past finally lifting off my shoulders. That night, I brewed a cup of tea on my balcony, jasmine my favorite. No fear. No secrets. Just peace. I sat quietly, staring into the stars, realizing that life had come full circle. The same cup that once enslaved me now symbolized victory. I raised it to the sky and whispered, to the women who survived, to the ones still trapped, and to the ones who haven't yet learned how strong they are. Then I took a slow sip. It tasted nothing like fear. It tasted like freedom. Do you think I should have handled it differently? Do you think I made a mistake from the beginning? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening to my story. Please like, subscribe and share if you enjoyed my story.